A lot of people, especially in the New York context, think that resistance might be running down the Trump Tower every time something pops off or showing up at an action. But the resistance, as you're talking about in terms of independence for Puerto Rico, can encompass some of those things, but the picture seems a lot broader.
Those are protests that we see. And I'm never one to be like, don't protest. I mean, I've been at protests, I've been arrested, I've gone to trial, I've shut down highways. Like, I think that's important. I think what's happened in the last couple of years is that's what people think is enough. Like, you yelling at an empty building on Federal Plaza at Friday might not be the best way. And now at this point, protests are scripted events. You work with the police, you work with community affairs, everybody marches this way. You don't have one sign, don't say that chant, don't do this. Scripted, they're controlled. What we need more is rebellious behavior. You know, it can't be the same kind of political theater of going to a building and yelling in front of it for 5 hours. What that space should be is that's where you're gathering with people who, when you're doing this work, you have to gather at certain times. Like, the Women's March was important. Why? Because this dude was being inaugurated and people were in pain and they needed community. Now, what happens after the Women's March or any of these, that's the organizing piece that happens. So it's always important, if you can, to show solidarity and protest, but the hard work begins when you're organizing on a day-to-day level. Like, for a lot of people, showing up at a building is enough. For some of us, organizing is our way of life. It's not an add-on to our lives, it's how we live our lives.
Everybody who's on the ground in Puerto Rico now has front of the brain survival on. So as an organizer, what's your call to action for people who have the luxury of being here and worrying about family who's on the island, but can push the needle on independence, where it's not necessarily they have to go looking for water for today, but you know, this is America. You never waste good tragedy. So what can people who have the comfort of running water do to make sure that we don't go back to an old colonial mindset once the roads are cleared?
Again, I think that mindset shifted very fast in Puerto Rico, that colonial and dependence on the U.S. government. But for Puerto Ricans who are in the diaspora, it's our job to go there immediately as soon as we can and work and fight for water. That's it. Like, water is life never meant as much to anyone right now. You know, our Native American indigenous brothers and sisters taught us that. And they try to give us the lesson for years, and then Standing Rock, and we still didn't listen enough. Puerto Ricans in the diaspora need to go in brigades. They need to follow the leadership of organizations here and on the ground. And literally, there are people right now I know with machetes trying to clear roads. I just saw a post of people building their own bridge because they can't wait for FEMA anymore, or the Corps of Engineers. So right now, in the immediate, we have to do that. As we're doing the immediate, that's when you build on political education. And again, always following the leadership of Puerto Ricans on the ground. We're seeing Puerto Ricans in crisis. We're seeing resistance, but we also don't realize there's a lot of young organizations that are taking this opportunity to deal with the crisis, who themselves are in crisis, right? But also saying now is that opportunity to envision, reimagine, and revive Puerto Rico.
So what's the way forward from that as an independent nation?
I think that we fight for independence by any means necessary. And I just think it keeps starting with political education and us bringing our babies and our younger generation to Puerto Rico as soon as possible. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I think it might happen in my daughter's lifetime. She's 12. So I see the role too that we need to bring our babies, if they haven't been yet, to the island, or now make it even more purposeful. Because they want a Puerto Rico without Puerto Ricans. And if you have a child and you passing on the legacy, it's them that's going to make Puerto Rico independent. I think that's the vision. and the way forward. And I hope that this catastrophe and the U.S. government neglectful response will move people to say very quickly, we won't participate in any of these elections that you bring forth unless the United Nations is talking about decolonization. So that's also going to require political leaders to have a lot of intense, deep conversation with international leaders and always stop depending on the U.S. government to do the right thing, or this current administration. They're never going to do the right thing.